What if everything you thought you knew about? One of the biggest political scandals in recent memory was actually, well, a meticulously crafted deception. Imagine a narrative so pervasive, so, deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness that questioning it felt almost sacrilegious. Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to becoming truly well-informed on complex issues. We peel back the layers, get straight to the crucial insights. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that has fueled endless debates, defined presidencies, and profoundly reshaped our understanding of political maneuvering. The highly controversial RussiaGate narrative. But we're not just rehashing old ground, no. We're exploring a new, explosive perspective, one that claims it was, from its very inception, an orchestrated plot. Our primary guide for this deep dive is the insightful and, frankly, incredibly detailed analysis shared by Tenenbaum on the YouTube channel Mookie Tenenbaum, specifically in their Observador International discussions. Tenenbaum approaches this as an Observador International, literally an international observer, right? Bringing a perspective often seen as, perhaps, detached from partisan domestic concerns. They offer a wealth of detail, drawing from what they describe as newly available information, presenting a truly surprising account of this complex story. Our mission today, to unpack every layer. From the initial accusations that first hit the headlines to these latest stunning revelations, we aim to understand the profound implications these developments have, not just for the political figures involved, but, for the fundamental trust in our democratic processes. The goal is to provide you, our listener, with a thorough, fact-based overview, those crucial aha moments, without overwhelming you with information overload. And as we explore these claims, it's really important to remember we're presenting Tenenbaum's analysis and perspective here. We're not endorsing or refuting the viewpoints in the source material. We're just here to help you understand the narrative as Tenenbaum lays it out. So let's unpack this.
Yeah, and what's really compelling about Tenenbaum's approach, I think, is how they frame the entire RussiaGate narrative. It's presented not merely as, a contested issue or even just a failed investigation. No, it's framed as a deliberate, calculated fabrication. And that forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of events and maybe most importantly, to scrutinize the underlying motivations behind what we thought we knew. The very foundation of the story in this interpretation, it just shifts dramatically.
That's precisely it. And to really grasp the gravity of Tenenbaum's claims, we have to rewind back to 2016, right after Donald Trump's unexpected presidential victory. As Tenenbaum recounts, almost immediately after his win, the airwaves were just saturated with accusations. The core of this burgeoning narrative was the assertion that Trump had only won due to widespread Russian intervention. And this wasn't just, idle speculation. Tenenbaum highlights that this storyline suggested really comprehensive manipulation, interference with advertising campaigns, direct meddling with votes. It all culminated in this idea of a grand Putin-Trump collusion. The legitimacy of the election itself was thrown into question almost instantly.
Exactly. And this wasn't just some, fleeting post-election grumbling, as Tenenbaum emphasizes. This was a well-defined and pretty potent accusation. This Russia-Trump collusion idea permeated the media, public discourse, really from the moment Hillary Clinton's loss became clear. It directly challenged the very legitimacy of the outcome, created an immediate, deep fissure in the political landscape. The impact of this narrative was profound, shaped the national conversation for years.
And a huge part of this unfolding drama, as Tenenbaum details it, revolved around a specific document, the Steele dossier. This was presented to the public as a collection of intelligence, supposedly compiled by a former British intelligence officer, Christopher Steele. Tenenbaum describes how this dossier contains some truly graphic and, frankly, repugnant descriptions. We're talking claims of Trump being blackmailed by Putin, allegedly over compromising activities with prostitutes in Moscow, just incredibly salacious stuff. Material meticulously designed, it seems, to grab headlines and solidify a very specific, deeply damaging image of the incoming president.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sheer audacity of these claims, as Tenenbaum points out, ensured they completely dominated the news cycle.
And that raises a key question, right? How did a narrative like that, filled with these sorts of allegations, gain such widespread acceptance, such legitimacy? Tenenbaum explains that high-level U.S. intelligence officials were absolutely instrumental in this process. We're talking about figures who held immense public trust. Heads of the FBI, the CIA, people like James Comey, James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, big names. According to Tenenbaum's account, these individuals publicly testified before Congress, asserting they possess sufficient documentation to confirm Russian intervention, and they specifically cited the Steele dossier as supporting evidence for their claims.
Right.
This created an incredibly strong public perception, a legitimate threat to election integrity, made it very difficult for the public to question the underlying claims back then. The weight of their positions just lent this air of undeniable truth to the narrative.
And that perception, yeah, we all remember it. It persisted for a very long time, even as official investigations started moving forward. Tenenbaum points out that despite months, really years, of extensive investigations, constant public discussion, this narrative continued to dominate headlines even after Trump left office, after Biden was elected. But the official conclusion eventually, no proof. That's what Tenenbaum highlights. No proof that Russia had actually interfered in the specific ways described. And crucially, no proof that Trump himself had colluded with Russia. That was a significant finding, wasn't it? Yet it seemed to have surprisingly little impact on the established public story.
Surprisingly little, exactly. As Tenenbaum stresses, this lack of conclusive proof from official investigations didn't make the narrative disappear. Not for a moment. Quite the opposite. It continued to haunt Trump throughout his entire presidency, cast this long, dark shadow over his administration. While official inquiries might not have found the smoking gun, the accusations themselves consistently questioned the legitimacy of his victory. And this created an atmosphere of suspicion, of mistrust, that, according to Tenenbaum, significantly impacted his administration's ability to govern effectively, particularly in its foreign relations, especially with Russia. The lingering questions, despite official findings, powerfully underscore, as Tenenbaum sees it, the immense power of a well-established narrative. Even when there's no solid evidence. It really speaks to how a story, once planted, can just take root and defy being dislodged, regardless of the facts presented later.
Okay, let's unpack this further, because this is where Tenenbaum's account takes a truly unexpected turn, revealing what they ascribe as a seismic shift in this whole saga. Following the 2020 election, Tenenbaum explains Trump made a crucial strategic adjustment, learning, as Tenenbaum puts it, from perceived mistakes in his first term. He moved to appoint loyalists to key positions within intelligence, law enforcement agencies. This included figures like Tulsi Gabbard, notably a former Democrat, to lead Secret Services, Kash Patel as FBI chief, Ratcliffe at the CIA. Tenenbaum asserts these new appointments were absolutely pivotal. Why? Because they initiated a fresh, unsparing investigation, a deep dive into the very origins of RussiaGate itself. This wasn't just a re-examination, right? This was, in Tenenbaum's view, a completely new, determined effort to uncover the full truth, driven by a new set of eyes and a clear mandate.
And what's really fascinating here, as Tenenbaum highlights, is that detail about Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat placed by Trump in this high-level intelligence role. And she's specifically initiated the request for the CIA to re-examine its archives concerning RussiaGate. This, from Tenenbaum's perspective, suggests maybe a bipartisan willingness, or at least a nonpartisan determination, to get to the bottom of it. It indicates that the drive to understand what really happened could transcend typical political lines, at least at this investigative stage.
That's an interesting angle.
It speaks to a pursuit of truth, regardless of previous affiliations, which is a powerful point if Tenenbaum's account holds water.
And it wasn't just these internal investigations starting up. Tenenbaum notes that from the very beginning, even when the RussiaGate narrative was absolutely peaking, at least one member of the American Congress had publicly stated that RussiaGate was, in their words, a complot against Trump, a conspiracy, basically. Back then, Tenenbaum reminds us this perspective was largely dismissed.
Just political defense of the president, right? Partisan noise.
Easily dismissed. Few outside of Trump's staunchest supporters really took it seriously. But now it seems that early skepticism might have been, well, far closer to the mark than anyone could have realized then. This detail from Tenenbaum paints a picture where dissenting voices were present, but just widely ignored in the initial fervor.
So the big question, what did these new investigations, spearheaded by these key appointments, actually uncover? Tenenbaum reveals that the ongoing investigation has unearthed a significant, varied body of documents, a veritable treasure trove, you might say. And these documents, according to Tenenbaum, indicate something truly explosive, profoundly disturbing, that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and those former heads of the FBI, CIA, Director of National Intelligence Clapper, Comey specifically, potentially with others, conspired to invent this story.
Wow.
That's a direct, unequivocal accusation from Tenenbaum, a meticulously fabricated narrative designed and put into place specifically to influence the political landscape. The sheer breadth of the alleged players involved, as Tenenbaum describes them, just amplifies the gravity of this claim.
And the alleged intent behind it. Tenenbaum says it goes far beyond just political mudslinging or trying to gain an electoral edge. Tenenbaum characterizes this alleged conspiracy as directly invented, a campaign that wasn't spontaneous but premeditated, prepared from scratch. The sheer volume, the variety of this newly discovered material, from Tenenbaum's perspective, points to something far more serious than just political dirty tricks. Tenenbaum labels it as nothing less than an attempt at a coup d'etat.
That's strong language.
Extremely strong. Tenenbaum is emphasizing the immense gravity of the alleged actions, implying a deliberate, calculated effort to undermine the democratic process itself, not just one individual's presidency. It really reframes the nature of the conflict as something far more fundamental than perhaps we understood before.
And furthermore, Tenenbaum points to a particularly damning aspect of this alleged plot, the accusation that the former heads of the FBI and CIA committed perjury when they testified before Congress. As Tenenbaum explains, these high-ranking officials repeatedly affirmed the existence of evidence for Russian interference, Trump's alleged blackmail, despite, as Tenenbaum asserts, knowing it was false.
Knowing it was false.
Tenenbaum stresses the extreme seriousness of perjury in the U.S. legal system. This isn't just a political misstep, it's a profound violation of judicial integrity. Perjury, Tenenbaum notes, is considered the third most serious crime in the U.S., carries significant prison sentences, especially for high-ranking officials. It underscores the severe legal ramifications these individuals could face if Tenenbaum's claims are proven true. The U.S. system places immense importance on truthful testimony.
So, if this alleged plot was indeed so premeditated, how exactly did this alleged deception work? How did they pull it off, according to Tenenbaum? Tenenbaum gets into the specifics of the deceptive tactics. One key method, as Tenenbaum explains, was exploiting Hillary Clinton's private email scandal. That was a genuine issue, right? Already captured public attention.
Right, it was already out there.
This existing scandal, the analysis suggests, was then framed as a Russian-orchestrated event. The narrative was spun, Russia used this email issue to interfere, and then, Tenenbaum continues, they further alleged Russia hacked voting machines, spread false rumors, all to manipulate the election. Tenenbaum unequivocally states, and I'm quoting here, all of this was a lie from A to Z. It was, in this account, a completely fabricated foundation, meticulously built on falsehoods, with supposedly no actual evidence supporting those claims of Russian interference or hacking.
And what's truly shocking, as detailed by Tenenbaum, are the allegations of direct orders to falsify information. Tenenbaum cites the existence of signed orders, specific emails, direct commands to falsify documents. A particularly chilling detail shared in this analysis is a purported signed order from Obama himself, stating, and I'm quoting from Tenenbaum's account again, I do not accept the analyses that say it did not happen. I want you to do a new analysis, and I want you to send me one that did happen.
Wow. Just lie to me.
Tenenbaum interprets this as a direct instruction to generate false evidence, effectively saying, yeah, lie to me, I like it. This speaks to an alleged intent to create a specific narrative regardless of the truth. A deliberate attempt to manipulate intelligence findings to fit a predetermined political agenda.
It's truly incredible to consider the implications of such a directive, if true. And it wasn't just about actively creating false evidence, according to Tenenbaum. It was also, crucially, about suppressing inconvenient truths. Tenenbaum explains that numerous intelligence specialists had already concluded and critically documented their findings. Russia did not intervene in the ways being claimed. These were professional assessments based on their analysis.
Their actual work.
Exactly. However, Tenenbaum alleges these accurate analyses were deliberately discarded, pushed aside in favor of this different narrative. Instead, only one analyst, whose findings supported the narrative Obama supposedly sought, was published and promoted. But what's crucial here, Tenenbaum notes, and what ultimately became a significant factor in these later investigations, is that these other specialists, well, they recognized the political pressure, perhaps protected themselves.
Covered their bases.
Right. They preserved their dissenting documents in the archives. It's because of their foresight, their adherence to facts, that these documents later resurfaced, providing crucial evidence for the current investigations, effectively serving as a hidden record of the truth that was allegedly suppressed.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture of the alleged plot, Tenenbaum asserts that the conspirators knew 100% that the Steele dossier, that cornerstone of so many initial accusations against Trump, was, in fact, false. Despite this absolute knowledge of its falsehood, Tenenbaum claims they deliberately utilized it to build their case against Trump.
Deliberately.
Deliberately. Tenenbaum points out this highlights a conscious act of deception, not just a mistake or a misjudgment based on faulty intelligence. It fundamentally changes our understanding of the information presented to the public back then. It wasn't a misunderstanding, in this view, but an alleged knowing manipulation. The implications of using demonstrably false information at such a high level to influence public perception and policy, they're profound.
So, with these explosive revelations now allegedly coming to light, what about the attempts to cover it up? And what are the legal battles looking like now? Tenenbaum offers some intriguing speculation regarding a very public event: that high-profile FBI raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. Ostensibly, it was about retrieving classified documents, right?
What are the official reason? Yeah.
But Tenenbaum speculates this raid may have been a covert, maybe even desperate, attempt to locate and retrieve a crucial document, #1. This document, supposedly from a CIA official, allegedly contained direct orders for the plot against Trump. The smoking gun, essentially, that would directly implicate the alleged conspirators.
So it raises the question, why would they think Trump had this specific document? Tenenbaum explains it's actually quite common, a long-standing practice for presidents, including Biden, Bush, to take certain documents with them after leaving office, particularly relating to their own administration or personal affairs. This practice, Tenenbaum believes, led the alleged conspirators to assume, perhaps incorrectly, that Trump must possess this key piece of evidence, the one that would directly implicate them. It was a calculated risk, maybe, based on established norms of presidential conduct.
But as Tenenbaum's analysis notes, the raid, well, according to their insights, it ultimately failed to locate that document, implying Trump never had it in the first place. Furthermore, Tenenbaum states that any attempts by the alleged conspirators to erase their traces within official archives were ultimately unsuccessful. Why? Because of the foresight and diligence of those other intelligence specialists who had documented their objections to the false narrative.
The ones who kept their records.
Exactly. They had, in essence, created a robust paper trail, a kind of internal resistance that couldn't be fully wiped away, preserving the truth in the official record for later discovery. It highlights the inherent difficulty, doesn't it, even for powerful people, to completely erase historical records.
And what's fascinating here are the potential legal ramifications for those allegedly involved. Tenenbaum really emphasizes that perjury in the U.S. is considered the third most serious crime in the federal legal system. It carries very significant prison sentences, especially when committed by high-ranking officials. The U.S. judicial system, Tenenbaum underscores, places immense importance on truthful testimony, considers it foundational to justice. Unlike some Roman law systems, maybe, where lying as an accused might be tolerated more,
Right.
this highlights the severe gravity of the alleged false testimonies given before Congress by former FBI and CIA heads. It turns a political controversy into a potential criminal matter with really serious consequences.
But what about that thorny issue of presidential immunity? That complicates things, surely. Tenenbaum discusses this complex legal principle, notes that while Trump himself recently benefited from a ruling granting immunity for actions taken during his presidency, Tenenbaum highlights Trump's own, maybe cynical, observation that this same ruling might, ironically, shield Obama from prosecution in this very case.
The irony.
Tenenbaum offers a strong critique of this outcome, implying that such broad immunity, especially in the context of these specific, severe accusations, could be seen as akin to a mafioso approach, suggesting it's not really a principle about justice or protecting presidential function, but a mechanism that could, in this extreme case, shield against grave alleged misconduct, potentially undermining the whole notion of accountability at the top.
And Tenenbaum, drawing on their understanding of legal principles, argues something else very important here, that the crime of this alleged plot might not have prescribed, meaning it might not have reached its statute of limitations if the conspiracy is deemed to be ongoing.
Ongoing? How so?
Well, in practical terms, if efforts to conceal the truth or perpetuate the false narrative are still active, the legal clock for prosecution might not have stopped ticking. Tenenbaum uses a very clear analogy: a kidnapping. The crime's end date isn't the initial abduction, right? It's the liberation of the victim. So this suggests that if elements of the plot are still being suppressed, or if the false narrative continues to be pushed, the statute of limitations may not apply, making these potential prosecutions incredibly significant and still very much active in the eyes of the law, potentially.
And to really drive home the scale of what Tenenbaum is describing here, they offer a striking comparison. Deeming the Watergate scandal minor in scope compared to this alleged RussiaGate plot, Watergate, Tenenbaum explains, focused on what Tenenbaum calls a stupid attempt to discredit a political opponent. and Nixon was likely going to win anyway, right?
Yeah, most accounts agree on that.
But that, Tenenbaum posits, just pales in comparison to an alleged plot designed to prevent a democratically elected president from taking office or to hamstring them with fabricated evidence and false testimony. Tenenbaum views this as a far more severe attack on the very foundations of democracy itself, puts it in a completely different category of political malfeasance, a betrayal of public trust.
And this perspective really broadens when you consider the legal steps Tenenbaum says are happening now. Tenenbaum points out that the U.S. Ministry of Justice and the FBI have already convened a grand jury to investigate these very claims.
A grand jury.
That's a critical procedural step in the American legal system. As Tenenbaum clarifies, the FBI investigates, gathers evidence, sends findings to the Ministry of Justice. If the evidence warrants it, the ministry convenes a grand jury. This secret group of citizens reviews the evidence, decides if there's enough probable cause to formally proceed with criminal charges to issue an indictment. It's the same rigorous process, Tenenbaum notes, that's been used to indict figures like Manuel Noriega, even Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, underscoring the seriousness of the investigation currently underway.
And this grand jury, as Tenenbaum describes it, isn't just a rubber stamp, right? It has power. It can direct further investigations, compel testimony. So Tenenbaum says we have a grand jury now actively investigating Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and those three key security chiefs from Obama's presidency, Comey, Clapper, and Brennan.
That's a quarter list.
It is. Tenenbaum believes that as this investigation unfolds, more individuals could fall under scrutiny, potentially face charges. What's also particularly fascinating, Tenenbaum adds, is the potential for internal leaks. Tenenbaum suggests there are people within the CIA and FBI who feel deeply resentful. They're mad, Tenenbaum says, because their truthful professional assessments that Russia didn't intervene were ignored, suppressed.
They want vindication.
Exactly. They now want to be vindicated, see the truth come out. Tenenbaum expects many of them to come forward, share even more information, providing an ongoing flow of critical evidence to the investigation. This points to maybe a deeper institutional pushback against what Tenenbaum describes as the alleged deception.
And connecting back to that legal point about the statute of limitations, this ongoing investigation, as Tenenbaum describes it, isn't merely about re-examining past events. Tenenbaum firmly states that if the conspiracy is indeed deemed ongoing, meaning if efforts to conceal or perpetuate the false narrative are still active, then legally the crime might not have prescribed. This is a critical legal point Tenenbaum makes. It extends the window for potential prosecution far beyond what many might typically assume for something that happened years ago. It transforms what could be seen as a historical matter into a potentially active, prosecutable legal case, elevates the stakes significantly for everyone allegedly involved.
That's a huge point. It means the legal clock might still be ticking because elements of the alleged plot are still, according to Tenenbaum, being suppressed or defended. It's not a static, closed event from years ago. Tenenbaum even goes so far as to use the phrase treason against the homeland from an ethical standpoint, mind you, given the alleged actions. A former president, high-ranking officials purportedly trying to prevent a democratically elected successor from taking office or undermining them with fabricated evidence.
It's an incredibly strong framing.
It is. This is not, in Tenenbaum's view, about a mistake or misjudgment. Tenenbaum highlights Obama's alleged direct instruction. Generate specific desired analyses, ignore dissenting, truthful views. It's an incredibly damning picture Tenenbaum paints, one that challenges the very integrity of the highest offices and institutions.
Which brings us back to Obama's potential liability given these claims. Tenenbaum discusses the complexity of presidential immunity again, notes that everything Obama did as president has some level of immunity attached. And ironically, Tenenbaum points out Trump himself commented, in light of his own recent immunity ruling, that this very ruling might save Obama from prosecution in this alleged plot.
The ultimate irony, perhaps.
Perhaps. But Tenenbaum finds this principle of immunity, when applied in the context of these specific severe accusations, to be akin to that mafioso approach, suggesting Tenenbaum views it not truly as a principle about justice or presidential function, but as a mechanism that could, in this extreme case, shield against such grave alleged misconduct, potentially undermining the very notion of accountability for those at the very top.
So, okay, moving beyond just the intricate details of RussiaGate itself, Tenenbaum also offers a broader, pretty piercing analysis of the current state of American politics, particularly focusing on the Democratic Party. Tenenbaum asserts the Democratic Party is, in their words, destroying itself. How? By increasingly embracing what Tenenbaum characterizes as crazy and ultra-left positions. This, Tenenbaum believes, is leading to a precipitous drop in their popularity, reportedly below 15% in some polls, according to Tenenbaum.
15%, that's low.
Very low. This perceived radicalization, Tenenbaum argues, is actively pushing away mainstream American voters who are generally more centrist or conservative in their outlook, creating a significant disconnect between the party's platform and the broader electorate.
And Tenenbaum provides several striking examples to illustrate what they consider these crazy things that are alienating voters. One instance Tenenbaum points to involves Democratic senators and representatives attempting to gain access to jailed, criminal, illegal immigrants. That's the term Tenenbaum uses, including those sought for serious crimes like rape. These politicians, Tenenbaum states, then proceed to create media spectacles, falsely claiming these individuals are locked in without cause or being mistreated, despite evidence of their alleged criminal conduct. This, from Tenenbaum's perspective, demonstrates a disconnect from public safety concerns and maybe a willingness to misrepresent facts for political gain.
Another powerful example Tenenbaum highlights how local police in major Democratic-controlled cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, reportedly refuse to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, like ICE. Tenenbaum even claims these local police forces sometimes go so far as to defend individuals accused of severe crimes, including child molestation, against federal apprehension.
Defend them against federal agents.
That's the claim Tenenbaum makes, suggesting a significant concerning disconnect from the concept of upholding federal law and ensuring public safety, illustrating a clash between local progressive policies and broader national legal frameworks.
And furthermore, Tenenbaum cites the, well, astonishing example of a New York City mayoral candidate, someone supported by a significant portion of the Democratic Party, apparently, who openly called for the extermination of the state of Israel.
In New York City.
In New York City. Tenenbaum emphasizes how incredibly extreme and divisive this position is, particularly in a city with a very large, influential Jewish population. This, Tenenbaum suggests, is a clear instance of radicalization within the party, showing how far certain segments have moved from traditional political discourse, potentially alienating a crucial voting bloc.
It's clear Tenenbaum sees a party adrift, losing its traditional moorings. Tenenbaum notes a distinct lack of clear, unifying leadership within the Democratic Party. As an example, Tenenbaum cites Kamala Harris's decision not to run for California governor, a move some saw as sidelining her, and then points to the poor reception of her recently published book, implying, according to Tenenbaum, that she is effectively out of the picture as a credible future leader. Tenenbaum also mentions that the party, in this analysis, has seemingly fallen into the hands of figures like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, people promoting policies like wealth redistribution. Tenenbaum characterizes these policies as populist and, in their view, may be excessively geared toward broad popular appeal without sufficient practical consideration, suggesting these positions are too far left for mainstream America, contributing to the party's declining appeal.
And Tenenbaum uses that recent Texas redistricting controversy as a stark, live example of what they perceive as profound political dysfunction within the American system. Tenenbaum explains the foundational role of the U.S. Census every 10 years, determines congressional representation per state, ensures districts reflect population shifts. Standard process.
Right.
Texas, experiencing significant population growth, particularly in more conservative areas, sought to redraw its electoral districts, aiming to create more Republican-leaning districts, increases Republican representation in Congress, routine, albeit often contentious, part of the legislative process.
And here's where the dysfunction, according to Tenenbaum, really ramps up, goes beyond standard political wrangling. To prevent the Republican-controlled Texas legislature from achieving the necessary quorum, that's 100 out of 150 members, to pass these new maps, 60 Democrat state representatives physically left Texas.
They just left.
Literally fled the state, Tenenbaum says, sought refuge in cities like New York, Boston, Chicago, effectively breaking quorum, paralyzing the legislative process, a deliberate, pretty extraordinary measure taken just to block the vote.
And Tenenbaum stresses that while tactics like denying quorum by leaving might be common, maybe even accepted as strategy in some political systems, perhaps Tenenbaum mentions Argentina, they are viewed very differently in the U.S., considered undemocratic actions within the U.S. political context, not seen as part of the normal give and take of legislative debate.
Right, it's not standard procedure.
Not at all. Tenenbaum notes the Texas governor even sought arrest warrants to compel their return, which further highlights the unusual, disruptive, legally challenged nature of this standoff. For Tenenbaum, this isn't just partisan maneuvering. It's an active subversion of legislative norms, an attack on the standard democratic process itself.
So, okay, we've covered these massive alleged scandals like RussiaGate, seen how Tenenbaum views political parties maybe in turmoil. But Tenenbaum brings it all back to one overriding factor, one thing they believe will ultimately decide everything: the economy. Tenenbaum emphasizes that despite all the political drama, the sensational scandals, Russiagate, Epstein allegations, whatever, despite pressing international concerns, Gaza, Russia, China, chips, the most critical, decisive factor for the average American voter is simple: the economy.
It's the economy, stupid.
Exactly. Tenenbaum cites that famous political saying to underscore that personal employment, financial stability, overall economic well-being, that dictates public sentiment and election outcomes far more profoundly than any other issue.
And Tenenbaum observes the current economic boom in the U.S., which might seem contradictory to some of these other points, but contrasts it sharply with what they see as increasing unemployment driven specifically by artificial intelligence, AI displacing workers.
Ah, the AI factor.
Yes. This, Tenenbaum believes, is the crucial, often overlooked underlying factor that will reshape the economic landscape. Tenenbaum argues that political leaders, including someone like Donald Trump, are making a significant strategic mistake by not directly, comprehensively addressing the profound societal impact of AI, the changing nature of work. Tenenbaum views this fundamental shift in the economy, this quiet but powerful technological revolution, as the real elephant in the room. The thing that will ultimately decide elections, regardless of the political noise, the scandals, even the international crises dominating headlines. It's the foundational shift that will dictate the future, according to Tenenbaum's analysis.
Wow, what a deep dive that was. We've really unpacked Tenenbaum's truly extraordinary account of the Russiagate narrative today, moving from those initial accusations of Russian interference right through to the stunning claim that it was, as Tenenbaum suggests, an alleged conspiracy involving high-level political figures, intelligence officials. We covered the seriousness of these claims, from alleged perjury to what Tenenbaum characterizes as an attempted coup, and how these alleged actions tie into the broader, increasingly polarized and maybe unconventional American political landscape, as analyzed by Tenenbaum.
Yeah, and understanding this complex history and Tenenbaum's unique perspective on it isn't just about past events, is it? It profoundly shapes the context of our current political realities, future elections.
Exactly. And the deep dive aims to equip you, our listener, with this crucial knowledge. So you're not just consuming headlines, but hopefully understanding the deeper forces at play as interpreted by a seasoned international observer like Tenenbaum. So here's a thought for you to mull over, building on Tenenbaum's insights. If the very foundation of major political narratives can be, as Tenenbaum suggests, meticulously fabricated and upheld through deception, what does that mean for our collective ability to discern truth in an increasingly complex information environment? And how might that fundamental challenge shape the future of democracy itself?